Who are some of the most despicable criminals around? Let's find out. Starting with number 6, twice as nice. Fraudster Ashley Singh went to prison for stealing debit and credit cards at the gym to fund his lavish lifestyle. And 5 years after his release, he was back behind bars for the same crime. Singh and his partner, Sophia Bruyea, snuck into the locker rooms of a bunch of gyms and searched people's belongings for their wallets and SIM cards. They maxed out the stolen credit cards on extravagant vacations, designer goods, and even a pedigree puppy. Before Bruyea became his partner in crime, Singh had worked with a man named Tony Clark, who helped him steal $290,000 from a bunch of other gym people's bank accounts while they did whatever gym people do at gyms, picking up things or whatever. Singh and Clark took photos of victims' credit cards and replaced their SIM cards with fake ones so they could take control of the bank account. It also meant that when they called the victims' banks, it looked like they were calling from the victims' phones. When they accessed someone's account, they would change PIN numbers, transfer money between accounts, and increase credit card limits. They used the money to buy things like Rolexes, but eventually, they were caught. Officers arrested Clark first, so Singh continued the operation on his own. Police tracked him down in September of 2018 and discovered he had multiple computers, tablets, 2 Rolexes, and another watch worth $56,000. Singh got tossed in the slammer by way of a 6.5-year prison sentence. If he had served his entire sentence, he wouldn't have left prison until 2025. But the terms of his imprisonment meant he was released on parole after serving only half of his sentence. So Singh immediately returned to doing crime the minute he got out. This time, Sophia Bruyea was his accomplice. For about a year, the pair stole $315,000 from gym lockers, and they weren't shy about flaunting their wealth either. Singh and Bruyea filled their social media pages with photos of themselves driving luxury cars, posing next to designer suitcases, and sharing clips of their expensive pedigree dogs. Law enforcement arrested the pair at London's Gatwick Airport after they returned from a trip to Paris. 18 victims came forward, all having suffered extreme stress due to the couple's thefts. Singh was sent back to prison for 3 years, and Bruyea received a 20-month sentence at a Young Offenders Institute, suspended for 2 years. So, since Singh clearly didn't learn anything at all the first time around, was 3 years enough time for the repeat convict, or should he have gotten a longer sentence? What do you think? Tell us in the comments below. Number 5. Blowing the life insurance. Krzysztof Baczynski stole his late wife's life insurance payout to spend on luxury vacations with his new girlfriend. He's a great guy. Anna Miszczuk had sadly passed away 2 months after receiving a breast cancer diagnosis back in September of 2017. She wanted her $250,000 life insurance money to go to her youngest son when he turned 25, which he would share with Patrycja, his sister. Patrycja was a trustee of her mother's insurance policies. But a month after Anna passed, Baczynski tricked his stepdaughter into signing the policies over to him. He then helped himself to the cash as if it were his own, and even tapped into some of it when his terminally ill wife was still alive. After Anna passed away, Baczynski invited Patrycja on multiple extravagant vacations, which he claimed to pay for as his business was flourishing. Although he used some of the life insurance cash to invest in a shop and help his failing business, it only took him 9 months to burn through all the money. Patrycja started to get the feeling something was wrong when she tried to dip into the money once to cover her rent, and Baczynski unexpectedly flipped. She finally figured out what he had done, and she saw pictures of him with his new girlfriend at fancy restaurants and enjoying a brand new hot tub. The situation destroyed the family. Patrycja knew Baczynski for most of her life and never thought he could do something so cruel. She was just 16 years old when he married her mother, and they lived together as a family in Poland for a while. Baczynski and Anna eventually moved to the UK, and Patrycja joined them soon after. Patrycja described them as an ordinary family until her mother's health declined. By the time Anna learned she had cancer, the disease had spread through throughout her body and was incurable. Patrycja wasn't sure of the exact moment when Baczynski got access to the life insurance policy, which her mother took out before she passed away for her children's future. After Anna's passing, there was a lot of paperwork, and it was hard to keep track of everything. Patrycja suspected her stepfather may have even hidden the papers from her. When Baczynski told Anna's children they couldn't use the life insurance policy, Anna's son called the financial advisor and learned that someone had wiped out the funds. So Patrycja called Baczynski to confront him, but he went quiet and hung up the phone. Friends convinced her to call the police, which she thankfully did, and they arrested the thief. During his trial, the judge pointed out that Baczynski didn't seem to want to accept that the money was his stepchildren's inheritance and not his. He received a 4-year prison sentence. Hopefully it sucks. Number 4. Pickleball Pickle. It's sad news when you learn that schemes have finally wormed their way into the pickleball community. We never thought it would happen either, but here we are. Rodney Rocket Grubbs, one of pickleball's best-known ambassadors, allegedly ran a Ponzi scheme where he scammed his wealthy friends out of millions of dollars. Grubbs launched Pickleball Rocks in 2009. The company sold apparel and equipment for the sport, and as pickleball grew in popularity, pickleball fans developed an interest in investing in his pickleball business. So, he convinced hundreds of people worldwide to invest millions of dollars in his company. It seemed like his business was thriving until January 2024, when the Indiana Secretary of State Securities Division sent him a cease and desist order for running a potentially fraudulent scheme. As a result, he faced $9 million in judgments and 4 additional lawsuits, where several scammed investors called for a federal judge to force the CEO into Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Grubbs told the judge that he couldn't afford to pay investors back, especially if all 250 of the people he scammed came forward. His only eligible assets were some rental properties and Pickleball Rocks equipment and apparel, which were worth less than $1 million combined. Before people learned the truth about Grubbs' scheme, he was a well-respected member of the pickleball community. He was friendly and engaging, and investors trusted him. His victims included doctors, lawyers, professors, and even a financial consultant. He used his reputation and the reputation of his investors to get people to give him more money. Ron Ponder, an Oklahoma-based pickleball referee, invested $65,000 in Grubbs' business. Grubbs approached Ponder to discuss his new business ideas and kept asking for more money, which the referee willingly gave him. Then, Grubbs failed to pay back a loan to Ponder, and a few weeks later, Ponder learned that the alleged entrepreneur had scammed hundreds of people. Grubbs gave all his victims a similar pitch, where he guaranteed a 12% interest rate and a lump sum repayment after 18 months. The deal was so enticing that people handed over their retirement funds and life savings. Investors begged for their money back, but Grubbs didn't respond, even when he received letters from lawyers. At this point, he hasn't been criminally charged over the scheme, but we're sure he's going to be, and will probably be rocketed to prison. Are you into pickleball? Or did you just give up trying to play because you have to fight a bunch of seniors to use the courts? Let us know in the comments below. Number 3. Miles Pfeffer. Temple University student Miles Pfeffer allegedly took the life of Temple University police officer Christopher Fitzgerald. He responded to an off-campus incident on a Saturday night in February of 2023. Fitzgerald was in an area near campus that had experienced a series of robberies and carjackings when he saw 3 people wearing masks and dressed in black. 2 of the suspected robbers fled, but Fitzgerald managed to catch up to Pfeffer. He chased after the 18-year-old, but after taking multiple rounds, the officer sadly collapsed. Pfeffer then approached Fitzgerald and dug through the cop's pockets, trying to take his weapon. He then allegedly ran up to a female student who was near her car and forced her to give him her keys. Pfeffer fled the scene in the stolen vehicle. A short time later, his mother picked him up and took him home. Law enforcement tracked Pfeffer down and arrested him in a multi-agency effort at his home in the Philadelphia suburbs. U.S. Marshals took him into custody wearing a pair of Fitzgerald's handcuffs, which is tradition in instances when there's a fallen officer. It wasn't the first time Pfeffer was on law enforcement's radar either, as he was one of 3 teenagers who threatened to cause harm at his high school. When administrators received the warning messages from the police department, they forced students to shelter in place and dismiss them early. The school never found evidence to back up the warnings, and Pfeffer was arrested several months later. He was charged with making false reports and terroristic threats in February of 2022. A year later, he was in handcuffs for Fitzgerald's passing, facing multiple charges. As of this video, the case case is still ongoing, but Fitzgerald's family is pushing for the final punishment, if you know what we mean. Number 2. iSpoof update. TJ Fletcher, the guy who masterminded the online fraud shop iSpoof, has been sentenced to 13 years in jail. We previously covered Fletcher's story in another video, so we wanted to give a quick update on the case. Fletcher was the founder and administrator of iSpoof. The site sold scammers tools to mask phone calls, so they appeared to come from a trusted organization like a bank to gain access to people's accounts. Scammers spent hundreds of thousands of dollars each month using the service. One of its most popular features was a piece of technology that let fraudsters pose as fraud department employees to con unsuspecting victims. Essentially, scammers used iSpoof's tools to access people's passwords and PIN codes, then emptied their bank accounts. One of the victims lost $3.8 million, and many of the scammers' targets experienced depression, emotional distress, and financial struggles. The site even created a bizarre and tasteless commercial that included images of happy business people who used iSpoof's innovative methods to manipulate victims. At the end, it said customers could pay using Bitcoin before a cartoon of people cheering as banks rained down upon them, because who doesn't love a bit of whimsy when ruining people's lives? Fletcher made roughly $2.5 million from iSpoof, which paid for his luxury London apartment, 2 Range Rovers, and a Lamborghini. Authorities took down the spoofing service in the UK's biggest fraud sting. London's Metropolitan Police tracked Fletcher down at his girlfriend's house and arrested him. As iSpoof's founder and lead administrator, Fletcher pleaded guilty to 4 charges, including supplying an article for fraud. He received a 13-year and 4-month prison sentence. Too bad there's no little commercial with a bunch of little prisoners raining down on him, right? If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right here for our past release to find out how she pretended to be a doctor. Number 1. The Hit and Run. Miami police arrested singer and influencer Danny Lee for a hit and run and driving under the influence. The accident occurred in May of 2023 when she crashed into a driver on a moped and fled the scene, despite the motorist sustaining serious injuries, including a kidney laceration and a spinal fracture. It happened early in the morning, and before the accident, people saw her driving recklessly in Miami Beach. After the incident, Danny Lee, who is rapper DaBaby's baby mama, headed to Miami International Airport. Police officers tracked down the singer, whose real name is Danielle Lee Curiel, and arrested her. She took a breathalyzer test, which revealed that her blood alcohol content was twice the legal limit. They booked her on 3 felony charges, which included driving and injuring someone while under the influence and fleeing the scene of a crash. And this wasn't Danny Lee's first time in handcuffs. In 2021, DaBaby called the police to make a report on Danny Lee roughing him up. Officers arrived on the scene and made no arrests, but came back the next day when the rapper claimed Danny Lee had done the same thing again. DaBaby live streamed his attempts at kicking Danny Lee out of his home on Instagram. Danny Lee retaliated by sharing a video of police officers responding to DaBaby's call. In the clip, she told viewers that he was trying to kick her and their 3-month-old baby out of the house. Danny Lee was released on a $9,500 bond following her May 2023 DUI arrest. Well, they sound like a great family, don't they? These scamming doctors are the exact type of people you don't want treating you or anyone you know. Let's dive right into their stories. Number 5. All Tired Out. O'Neill Ron Morris, also known as the Duchess, was a transgender con artist and self-proclaimed doctor who injected various industrial substances into people's behinds in order to give them a bigger caboose. Morris used a cocktail of various substances, including cement, superglue, and fix-a-flat tire inflator, giving new meaning to the term having a flat butt. Morris had already been caught once before for practicing medicine without a license. However, she continued to operate illegally, often using fake names and advertisements to lure customers. Morris's biggest scam was injecting industrial-grade silicone into people's behinds as part of an enhancement procedure. Even performed under a doctor's care, medical-grade silicone is a dangerous substance that can lead to serious health consequences and isn't FDA recommended for beauty fillers. This is also a rare instance where contracting authorities overlaps with the FDA, and they also recommend against using industrial-grade silicone as beauty fillers. Finally, they both agree on something. Morris was injecting her victims with silicone she purchased at her local Home Depot, since they probably had better prices than Lowe's. Dubbed the toxic tush doctor, she was convicted of manslaughter after one of her clients passed from complications stemming from the injections they received. During her trial, it was revealed that Morris had placed ads on sites like Craigslist and Backpage offering, quote, buttocks enhancement services. Her victims would often pay upwards of $2,000 for the procedure. Many victims came forward with stories of how Morris had injected them with the industrial-grade silicone, often without anesthesia. One victim spoke of how she was left with lumps and bumps all over her behind, and another said she was in so much pain that she couldn't sit down for weeks. In total, Morris is believed to have injected more than 50 people with industrial silicone. Morris began her career sometime around 2006 when she injected a woman's butt with a combination of cement, fix-a-flat tire sealant, and superglue. The woman soon developed necrosis, which is basically that part of the body decaying or dying. She had to have surgery to remove the injection. Another of Morris's victims stated that she had received injections from Morris on 3 separate occasions. The first time was in 2007, and it was a mixture of silicone and an unknown substance. The second time was in 2008, and it again was silicone and an unknown substance. The third time was in 2009, and it was a combination of crazy glue, super glue, liquid nails adhesive remover, and cement mix. Unfortunately, this victim also developed necrosis and had to have surgery to correct the damage done by Morris's treatments. In the end, Morris was sentenced to 10 years in prison, though she will only serve 4 years due to a plea deal. However, many believe that she deserved much harsher punishment considering the seriousness of her offenses. Her victims were left scarred, both physically and emotionally, but at least they can rest assured knowing that the toxic tush doctor is now behind bars where she belongs. Number 4. OBGY No. Dr. Javid Purwaitz was a well-respected OBGYN in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia for nearly 4 decades. But it turns out that all that time, he was preying on his patients just to make a quick buck. Dr. Purwaitz scammed Medicaid by billing for procedures he never performed. But the true horror came when Javid actually did enter the operating room. Over the course of a decade, Dr. Purwaitz performed irreversible hysterectomies, sterilizations, and other surgeries on his patients, in many cases using broken equipment, giving at least 173 women life-altering surgeries. According to prosecutors, Dr. Purwaitz would convince women that they needed certain operations by telling them exaggerated or outright false information about their health. In some cases, he would tell patients that they had cancer or were at risk of developing cancer if they didn't have a hysterectomy or some other surgery immediately. In many instances, the surgeries occurred within days of the false diagnosis. Sadly, these surgeries were completely unnecessary, put the women's health at risk, and changed their lives in a way that cannot be undone. The equipment Dr. Purwaitz used was often damaged or wasn't sterilized, and he regularly reused single-use gloves. As a result, many of his patients suffered complications from the surgeries, some of which were life-threatening, leaving many with irreparable damage. 25 of Dr. Purwaitz's patients testified at his sentencing hearing, sharing their stories of how Dr. Death, as he'd been dubbed, had ruined their lives. One victim shared a story that on Dr. Purwaitz's recommendation, she had a hysterectomy in order to avoid potential cancer, only to learn that the surgery was unnecessary and that she will never be able to have children of her own. Another victim said she also thought Purwaitz was acting in her best interest when he told her that she needed a hysterectomy as well. She has since experienced a myriad of complications due to Dr. Death's handiwork and now has to take medication to control the symptoms for the rest of her life. Many of the women who testified against Dr. Purwaitz said they kept him as their doctor even after their procedures because they trusted him. It wasn't until they started hearing news reports about his criminal activity that they realized how badly they had been harmed. In November 2020, following an expert opinion which deemed a staggering 52 surgical procedures performed were unnecessary, a federal jury convicted Dr. Prowace of 52 counts of healthcare fraud and false statements. In total, Dr. Prowace was responsible for over $20 million worth of false and fraudulent billings for both himself and the hospitals where he performed the surgeries. What did he trade his victims' ability to ever have children for? Lavish gifts for himself and others, including luxury cars like Bentleys and Ferraris. In April of 2021, Prowace was sentenced to 59 years in prison, which meant that at 71 years old, he will likely spend the rest of his life incarcerated. While that may provide a small amount of satisfaction to his victims, no amount of prison time can undo the damage that Prowace has caused. Number 3. Dr. Staged. Dr. Sadie Ribeiro was a pain management doctor and surgeon. He's facing up to 10 years in prison for his role in an insurance fraud scheme that bilked millions of dollars from poor and vulnerable patients. Ribeiro pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with the scheme. Ribeiro enticed more than 400 homeless and drug-addicted patients to submit to surgeries they didn't need so that he and his partner could take payouts from the insurance companies. Ribeiro is the second person to plead guilty in the case. Adrian Alexander, 77, who owned a litigation funding company that was behind the scheme, previously pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. According to a federal indictment, Ribeiro and Alexander spearheaded an extensive insurance fraud scheme through which participants staged trip and fall accidents and subsequently filed fraudulent lawsuits that enriched both men to the tune of $31 million. The patients, many of them homeless or addicted to drugs, were enticed with small sums of money to participate in the scheme and then underwent unnecessary back surgeries and other medical procedures so that Ribeiro and his partners could collect insurance payouts. Patients were also instructed to receive ongoing medical care and chiropractic treatment from specific medical professionals, usually Ribeiro, under the guise that it was required for their lawsuit cases. In some cases, the defendants even created fake x-rays purporting to show disc herniation stems to justify lumbar spinal fusions on otherwise healthy people as young as 20 years old. This greedy criminal offense not only took advantage of people who could ill afford it, but put their lives at real risk. Victims often had little choice other than to comply so long as they continued to receive benefits like food, clothing, and other assistance. From 2015 until 2018, more than 400 people participated in the scheme, many of them recruited while receiving assistance at homeless shelters around New York City. Many were drug addicts or homeless with mental issues. Alexander typically funded each personal injury lawsuit by loaning participants $30,000 to cover living expenses, court fees, costs related to surgical bills, and other associated costs. Invariably, those loans carried extraordinarily high annual percentage rates, often 100% and upward. As a result, almost all of any settlement or damages awarded went towards satisfying the loan, leaving participants with little or no funds. Ribeiro admitted that he performed close to 200 surgeries on patients who were part of the scheme and also paid kickbacks for patient referrals. In addition to facing up to 10 years in prison, Ribeiro has agreed to forfeit more than $500,000 to the U.S. government and make a restitution payment of nearly $4 million. Ribeiro is scheduled to be sentenced on January 5th, 2023, and Alexander on November 30 of this year. Number 2. Masquerading. Sarah Kane was banned from every hospital in the UK after being caught posing as a doctor twice. Most recently, she avoided jail time by admitting to the charges of impersonating a doctor and theft of medical equipment. Kane had been masquerading as a doctor for some time, even going so far as to post pictures of herself in scrubs on Facebook with captions like, "Work can be a time for pulling faces." Neighbors interviewed after her guilty plea said that they had no idea she wasn't actually a doctor. One close friend described her as a Walter Mitty type, someone who is prone to wild flights of fancy because she was unsatisfied with her life. Posing as a doctor, Kane was seen by 2 nurses who recognized her from when she had been treated there before. She claimed to be training as part of her doctorate, but it quickly became clear that she didn't really know what she was doing. CCTV footage showed her wandering around the hospital for hours before being confronted by staff and eventually arrested by police. When officers searched her house, they found a trove of medical equipment that she had stolen from the hospital, including surgical scrubs, bandages, syringes, and saline solution. Although she avoided jail time, Kane was fined £440. Thankfully, she never interacted with any patients, just walked around the hospitals aimlessly. No harm, no foul? With all these shady medical professionals running around, the only ones we trust are Dr. Dre and Nurse Slim. Number 1. Off-brand. Sine Marie Brand was a bogus cardiologist who was operating in South Africa. She was arrested after it was discovered that she didn't have the proper medical qualifications to be practicing medicine. Brand was accused of advertising for house calls using the information of a registered physician and also issuing fake prescriptions to people seeking medical attention. Brand could have easily put people's lives in danger had they taken the fake prescriptions or listened to her phony medical advice. Luckily, she was arrested before anyone was harmed. Police were first tipped off by a patient who grew suspicious after receiving a prescription from Brand. Brand initially denied any wrongdoing, but soon began to change her story as inconsistencies were discovered, such as claiming an actual residence rather than crashing on a former cellmate's couch. Brand also failed to appear in court for one of the bail hearings, and a warrant for her arrest was issued. On what was expected to be her last bail application, Brand suddenly announced her intention to plead guilty to all the charges against her. Seeing as she pleaded guilty, the judge found Brand guilty on 10 counts of violating medical practice laws and 1 count of fraud. Brand was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and her case has been widely publicized in order to warn the public about fake physicians. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you think the fried chicken king is, Popeyes or KFC?